Good afternoon. So, the title of the talk this afternoon, The Search for Divine Wisdom. It's an exploration of the path leading to divine wisdom, Theosophy or Theosophia, which actually means wisdom of the gods. I'd like to look at, first of all, where have we come from? What has been our path up to this point? Secondly, I'd like to look at how Theosophy has come to us, and who or what are the teachers and divine beings who have appeared throughout this and previous ages to guide humanity in that search. And then thirdly, where might we be going? What do we have to do in our lives to aid our evolution and that of the planet? Now, this week we've had a brilliant selection of talks, courses and activities all about this subject of divine wisdom, and it illustrates very well the diversity of paths and teachings. If we look back, first of all on Sunday, Bhupendra Vora introduced us to the contemplative words of the Isha Upanishad. This was followed by the Blavatsky lecture given by Kim Dew, looking at the wisdom as it has grown in all of us. On Monday, Barry introduced us to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and Ted Capstick gave a talk on the rays. Colin on Tuesday I had a look at the questions raised by the concepts of God, contrasted with the approach found in the first fundamental proposition of the secret doctrine. Later that day, Wayne gave us a talk on our higher self as shown in the Bhagavad Gita. And in the evening, Kim Dew gave us another talk on how we live our lives, the need to live the Dharma, and what is that Dharma? What does it mean? And not to bury our talents. On Wednesday, Michael von Buren drew on the teachings of all the major religions in his talk, The Flame of Wisdom. Thursday, Gary Kidgell gave us a talk on looking behind the veil of Maya or illusion. And in the afternoon, Ron gave us an interesting comparing of religions as practiced in the world and what we find in the first fundamental proposition. And then this morning, Sri Shankarya and the Crest Jewel of Wisdom, a lovely contemplative and aspirational guide to the spiritual life given by Jenny. Now, mention of all these subjects is found in the writings of H.P. Blavatsky, and all illustrate the diversity of inspiration and wisdom that humanity has received from great teachers and divine beings. Great teachers and divine beings who have appeared throughout this and previous ages to inspire and guide. Now, much ancient law was drawn together in the secret doctrine, and it's easy to forget nowadays, 128 years later, with the huge amount of information on these subjects that we now have, that 1888 was the first time that all this closely guarded secret and esoteric knowledge was given to the world. And the teachings of Theosophy, the secret doctrine, is not some stuffy old Victorian ramblings of an elderly eccentric. It's an introduction and a gateway to the ancient wisdom, also called the ageless wisdom, because it is just that. It is timeless and ageless. It applies to all past ages and to all ages in the future, because it is the fundamental truth that lies behind everything. So, looking back then to the first point, what is our path, the path of humanity up to this point? Well, I think there are two really important parts to this, two things that we we need to take into consideration. That's reincarnation and evolution. And this is how we learn. I mean, it doesn't really make sense if this life is all there is. And then we have to remember that we've incarnated lifetime after lifetime. It's a huge rolling evolution of us and everything around us, out to the world, to the planets. Darwin did have a piece of it with his theory of evolution, and remembering our 7 principles, he got a part of it. He got a part of the physical. But we also have to put it into context when we learn in Theosophical teaching that each of us have worked our way up through the kingdoms of nature. There's much more to it than just Darwin's evolution. We've worked our way up through these kingdoms in Passamanvantaras, or great ages. We've each been through the mineral, plant, animal and human. And this is introduced in the 3rd fundamental proposition in the proem. Another major thing that we have to remember, that everything is alive. And to quote HPB, occultism does not accept anything inorganic in the cosmos. The expression employed by science, inorganic substance, means simply that the latent life slumbering in the molecules of so-called inert matter is incognizable. All is life, and every atom of even mineral dust is alive. This incandescent cosmic dust, HPB tells us, which follows magnetically as the iron filings follow the magnet, the directing thought of the creative forces. Yet this cosmic dust is something more, for every atom in the universe has the potentiality of self-consciousness in it, and is a universe in itself and for itself. It is an atom and an angel, she tells us. And it's a continual evolution, physically, mentally, and spiritually. So, what about our individual paths up to this point? I mean, we've all started to search, to push forward that evolution. The fact that we're here means that. We've all started to ask the big questions, what life is about, as has been mentioned several times this week. Now, with some of you, it probably started a few lifetimes ago. Some of us are fairly new to it. But there's been something that's made us wake up and start to question. Things, events that we've come across in our lives, which we probably planned before our births, or put there by karma, whichever teaching you favour. Put there to remind us, and it's something to give us a nudge. And I would think that every one of you has had specific things that have made you start to question what's it all about, and then have guided us. It could be a book, a teacher, a priest, or it could be a dream, or the feeling of a presence, a guardian angel perhaps. H.P. Blavatsky had this. She had visions of her master, Master Moria, who saved her life a couple of times. She says, during her childhood, she had often seen near her an astral form that always seemed to come in at any moment of danger, and to save her just at the critical point. HPB had learned to look upon this astral form as a guardian angel, and felt that she was under his care and guidance. So imagine her surprise then, when in London in 1851, aged 20, with her father, when visiting the Great Exhibition, she actually met him. He had come to London with a group of Indian princes on an important mission. But he was also desirous of meeting her personally, as he required her cooperation in the work which he was about to undertake. He then told her about the Theosophical Society and how it was to be formed, and that he wished her to be the founder. He gave her a slight sketch of all the troubles she would have to undergo, and also told her that she would have to spend 3 years in Tibet to prepare her for the important task. It always makes me smile when I read that, about the slight sketch of all the troubles she would undergo, all the problems that she had. After 3 days' serious consideration and consultation with her father, HBB decided to accept the offer made to her, and shortly afterwards left London for India. Now, 1851 was the year of the Great Exhibition in Hyde Park at the Crystal Palace, and it was HBB's 20th birthday. That's the 12th of August. That's 185 years ago today. Now, this piece appears in the Reminiscences of H.P. Blavatsky and the Secret Doctrine by Countess Watchmeister. And the Countess also writes, "I was in England at the time of the visit of the Indian delegation, and remember hearing that they and their suite were a fine set of men, and one of them was immensely tall. Master Moria was said to be 6 foot 8 inches tall." So, looking at the second point, how has Theosophy come to us? And who or what are the teachers and divine beings who have appeared throughout this and previous ages to guide humanity in that search for divine wisdom? Now, specifically, the early foundations of Theosophy came through HPB and her masters, mainly Masters Moria and Kuthumi, who revealed to her these timeless teachings and made her travel the world studying other religions and beliefs, including several years spent with Master Moria in Tibet. And then when she came to write, to put these things down on paper, the stanzas of Zan, that formed a very important part. The stanzas of Zan, Chan or Zen, are alternative spellings. And Zan is the Tibetan way of, I don't know if it's pronouncing, but certainly spelling the Sanskrit word dhyana. That's what that actually means. And it means spiritual or mystic meditation. So if we look at the stanzas of Zan then, they are the texts which are used in the Secret Doctrine, around which HPB builds the text of the book. Book 1, Cosmogenesis, has 7 of these stanzas or chapters, and Book 2, Anthropogenesis, 12. The Voice of the Silence, HPB's more meditational book, is also based on them, and a set of very ancient mystical texts. They're derived from what HPB calls a very old book, an archaic manuscript, she tells us, a collection of palm leaves made impermeable to water, fire and air by some specific unknown process. Tradition says that it was taken down in Senzar, the secret sacerdotal tongue, from the words of divine beings who dictated to the sons of light in Central Asia at the very beginning of the 5th hour race. For there was time, she tells us, when its language, the Senzar, was known to the initiates of every nation, when the forefathers of the Toltec understood it as easily as the inhabitants of the lost Atlantis. The Secret Doctrine is the accumulated wisdom of the ages, she tells us, set down by countless generations of initiated seers and prophets. She says, the flushing gaze of those seers has penetrated into the very kernel of matter and recorded the soul of things there. It is the uninterrupted record covering thousands of generations of seers whose respective experiences were made to test and to verify the traditions passed orally by one early race to another, of the teachings of higher and exalted beings who watched over the childhood of humanity. For long ages, the wise men of the fifth race, of those saved and rescued from the last cataclysm and the shifting of continents, had passed their lives in learning, not teaching. And they spent it by checking and testifying and verifying in each department the nature of the ancient traditions. And we're told that no vision of one adept was accepted until it had been checked and confirmed by the visions of other adepts, so obtained as to stand as independent evidence. And this took place over centuries. So this book was copied, and it's a very small book, only a few leaves. And together with commentaries and a glossary, it makes up a body of texts known as the Books of QT. That's spelled Kiu-Te. Now, these are 35 volumes of exoteric writings and 14 volumes of commentaries and annotations, which are secret and esoteric. The exoteric texts were often copied onto discs or plates and are generally preserved on the altars of temples of the Mahayana Buddhists. These 35 are the popularised version, and HBB tells us they're full of myths, blinds and errors. Now, the 14 volumes of commentaries, with their translations, annotations and glossary of occult terms, contain a condensed form of all the occult sciences. And these are kept secret and apart in the charge of the Teshe Lama of Shigatse. As HBB says, this wisdom was taken down in Senzar, quotes, from the words of the divine beings, who dictated it to the sons of light in Central Asia at the very beginning of that's the fifth race. So who are the divine beings, the sons of light and the masters? Well, the divine beings first. You could describe them as the hierarchies of angels or Dhyani Buddhas. And we've come across them in previous talks this week. They're the original angels or Dhyani Buddhas that originated in that first explosion of light, life and energy right at the beginning of the universe. It could be what the scientists call the Big Bang, but of course it's on many more levels than just the physical. The stanzas describe it very poetically: the unparalleled refulgent glory, bright space, son of dark space, who emerges from the depths of the great dark waters. He shines forth as the sun. He is the blazing divine dragon of wisdom. And he contains in himself the seven creative hosts, also described as the first seven breaths. And this is the top rank of the hierarchy of angelic beings, seven Dhyani Buddhas. As I said, we've had reference to these in many different forms throughout this week. For these seven chief groups of Dhyanis are found and recognised in every religion, for they're the primeval seven rays, and they have many names. They're also known as the seven sons of light. They're also called stars, dragons of wisdom, or angels of a specific star. They correspond to the seven archangels, or the angels before the throne, in the Christian or the Book of Revelations. And I know we anthropomorphise them, we depict them as beautiful beings with wings, or the Buddhists as seated figures with their colours and attributes. But they're actually forces, and they unfold layer upon layer of hierarchies, of lesser Dhyani Buddhas, dragons of wisdom, or archangels. In the Secret Doctrine commentaries, not the ancient commentaries, this is a compilation of discussions that HBB and a few of her friends had, which were taken down. And from it we get much useful information. because they asked the same sort of questions that we did, and it's lovely to read some of them, because the true character of HPB comes out, and she wasn't some crusty old lady. She got a really good sense of humour. So anyway, she tells us the hosts of the Dhyani Buddhas evolve a lower set of Dhyani Buddhas, and these a third, and so on. And she says there's 7 of them, but though in Tibet they only take 5. They only take 5 Buddhas. After that, they begin to be cosmocratores, the builders, or call them whatever names you like. They've all got special names in the Sanskrit. And then the builders of the astral light. She says it's an endless hierarchy of one kind of Dhyanis evoluting another kind. Every one becomes more consolidated, more material, until it comes to the builders of this universe. So at the seventh level, we're told, they reincarnated on Earth, and they were the first divine dynasties. And they came to start our present civilization, our present 5th race. They also did this in the 3rd race, Lemuria, and the 4th race, Atlantis. And they're not just myths. Some of the names have come down to us historically. In Egypt, Osiris and Isis were ancient and divine instructors. In fact, Osiris is buried up in the hills behind Abydos. That's why Abydos became the most important pilgrimage centre for his worship. They came, this is Isis and Osiris, and they brought wisdom and also the practical knowledge of cultivating wheat and crops. Other examples of the divine beings. It could be Krishna. One of the incarnations of Krishna. As HBB tells us, 5,000 years ago, the bright sun god, the once living hero and reformer, actually incarnated on Earth. Quetzalcoatl in South America, the plumed serpent deity of the Mexicans, may have been another. In the ancient legends, you can see the traces of them. Their first disciples called themselves Sons of the Dragon, especially in China. And these original teachers, HBB tells us, were still revered in China as dragons of wisdom, or serpents of wisdom. That would have been back in 1888. She says that the name became universal, and no sane man before the Christian era would ever have confounded the myth with the symbol. Now, the ancient commentaries tell us that the great dragon has respect, but meaning only, for the serpents of wisdom, the serpents whose holes are now under the triangular stones, that is, the pyramids at the 4 corners of the world. And this is mentioned more than once elsewhere in the commentaries, namely that the adepts, or wise men of the 3 races, 3rd, 4th and 5th, dwelt in subterranean habitats, generally under some kind of pyramidal structure, if not actually under a pyramid. She said, for such pyramids existed in the 4 corners of the world and were never the monopoly of the land of the pharaohs. So I just wonder what sort of age this is likely to have been. And the Victorian archaeologists couldn't agree. Times were all over the place. Ages. HBB tells us about the Dendera zodiac. Now, the present one is quite a recent one. It's Ptolemaic, but maybe it was a copy of an old one. But even so, she says it shows the Egyptians going back 3 sidereal years. Well, sidereal years was about 26,000 years, which would give the age of the Great Pyramid, she says, 78,000 years. It might not be true, but it's certainly interesting. So, some initiates are connected with pyramids, others, they're spread all over the world. And HPB describes her masters. She says they're part of the Himalayan Brotherhood. She says, there is beyond the Himalayas a nucleus of adepts of various nationalities. And the Teshi Lama knows them, and they act together. Some of them are with him and yet remain unknown in their true character, even to the average lamas, who are ignorant fools mostly. Her words, not mine. She says, my master and KH, and the several others I know personally, are there, coming and going, and they are all in communication with adepts in Egypt and Syria and even Europe. They're known as the Trans-Himalayan Brotherhood, and they are venerated in India, and they are called the Great Teachers of the Snowy Mountains. And I thought maybe, is there any other evidence that they've left behind? There's all sorts of buried huge buildings and things. So we have the pyramids, and we don't really know how old they are, but again, probably very old. But some of the most interesting must be the Bahmian statues. And regarding their history, HBB tells us that they were built by initiates of the fourth race, who sought refuge after submersion of their continent in the fastnesses and on the summits of the Central Asian mountain chains. She tells us the 5 statues are an imperishable record of the esoteric teaching about the gradual evolution of the races. The largest is made to represent the first race of mankind, its ethereal body being commemorated in hard, everlasting stone, for the instruction of future generations, as its remembrance would otherwise have never survived the Atlantean deluge. So the first one, the largest, symbolising the first race, is 173 feet tall. The second, 120, and the third, 60 feet. That's the third race. The fourth one, the Atlantean, she says, though gigantic in comparison with our present race, is a lot smaller. The Buddhist arhats and ascetics found them when they were looking for a place to build their retreats. Apparently there were many others that were crumbled then, but the Buddhist arhats and the ascetics covered them with plaster and remodelled and gilded them. Yuan Tsang, a Chinese traveller writing in the 7th century, said that they were so bright, these huge gilded statues, that they dazzled one's eyes. So coming back to HBB and her masters, the Trans-Himalayan Brotherhood. We're told that Masters KH and Maurya, it's Kuthumi, Master Maurya, they were concerned and saw that humanity was falling behind in its spiritual evolution, weren't up to speed, and they pioneered the setting up of the Theosophical Society. Now, the head of their order, the Maha Chohan, was very sceptical. But apparently, Master KH and Master Maurya had looked for 100 years to find a suitable person in a Western body with the right spiritual sensitivity before they found HBB. And we can see from the Mahatma letters that she received constant guidance on everything, where to travel, who to meet, the setting up of the society, and even instructing her to buy the Adyar estate. So then, if we look at the third thing the third subject. So, where might we be going? Now, this really depends on each one of us. Where are we going as a race? There are some New Age warnings that we're approaching some of the genetic manipulations that we reached in Atlantis. So, where are we going? And do we have masters and other beings that are around us still? Well, there's a speaker from Canada, Ron Chapman. I know some of you know him, and he comes to speak at the lodge. He's been coming for about 10, 11 years at least. And he's very inspirational, and he recounts to us stories of present-day great beings that have helped him. And he spins marvellous stories about how he's walking down a street in India. I think he must have been to one of the Kumbh Melas, and he was on his way to see a great guru, when suddenly there was a little man seated at the side of the road, a beggar, and he tells us how he made eye contact with this beggar. And suddenly there was so much energy coming from this little man that he said he was an adept, and he felt that he opened up his vision, and it was certainly some sort of initiation. And he said, well, you never know who you might meet. These beings are still around. Mostly, I think they work alongside us unseen. But sometimes we do know about them. And I think Ramana Maharshi, for one, was a great sage. And he was sent to help us. But there's so many that we don't know about. And again, maybe you feel that you've all been helped by beings on all sorts of levels. Teachers who have inspired you, or beings around that you feel have helped you. So what is our relationship to these beings? What should we do? Do we venerate them? Do we pray to them? HPB tells us, neither the collective host nor any of the working powers individually are proper subject for divine honours or worship. All are entitled to the grateful reverence of humanity, however, and man ought to be ever striving to help the divine evolution of ideas, by becoming to the best of his ability a co-worker with nature in the cyclic task. So, we need to develop our inner tuition and work with them. And there are many pointers in the Theosophical teachings, from general through to discipleship, so whatever level that you're at. And we've seen an extremely good range of this week in the amazing set of talks and workshops that have been on offer. And Jenny this morning gave a lovely talk on the guidance for the spiritual life. There are also excellent pieces in the Voice of the Silence and in the published literature for the esoteric section. In the Voice of the Silence, we have the parameters as guidance on the spiritual path, as some of us have been studying with Wayne. And I'd like to end with two kinds of approaches. First, a practical piece outlining what we need to be aware of in our dealings with the world. It's taken from the first letter of KH to A.O. Hume, dated the 1st of November 1880. I say practical, something to be aware of. Every thought of man, upon being evolved, passes into the inner world and becomes an active entity by associating itself, coalescing, we might term it, with an elemental. That is to say, with one of the semi-intelligent forces of the kingdoms. It survives as an active intelligence, a creature of the mind's begetting, for a longer or shorter period, proportionate with the original intensity of the cerebral action which generated it. Thus, a good thought is perpetuated as an active, beneficent power, an evil one as a maleficent demon. And so man is continually peopling his current in space with a world of his own, crowded with the offspring of his fancies, desires, impulses, and passions. A current which reacts upon any sensitive or nervous organisation which comes in contact with it, in proportion to its dynamic intensity. So it's a reminder that thoughts are things. And finally, there's two aspirational pieces from H.B. Booth. She says, "It is, however, right that each member, once he believes in the existence of the Masters, should try to understand what their nature and powers are, to reverence them in his heart, to draw near to them as much as in him lies, and to open up for himself conscious communication with the Guru to whose bidding he has devoted his life. This can only be done by rising to the spiritual plane where the Masters are, not by attempting to draw them down to ours." And finally, she says, "I add that gentle kindness to all beings, strict honesty, not according to the world code, but that of karmic action, virtuous habits, strict truthfulness and temperance in all things, that these alone are the keys that unlock the doors of earthly happiness and blissful peace of mind, and that fit the man of flesh to evolve into the perfect spirit ego." Thank you.